So, week 14 of the NFL season might have been the most crazy of them all so far. We had unlikely heroes like Tommy DeVito and Zach Wilson, massive upsets, huge chokes, blowouts between two big teams. There was a lot of stuff to unpack, and as a result, a lot of us, including myself, did not do very well in the prediction column. And at this point, maybe I should consider retirement. But regardless, we press on, and we look towards the next week. But things don't exactly start off on the best foot, as Thursday Night Football features the Chargers versus the Raiders, an AFC West battle going on here. Neither team's exactly in the best situation. They both honestly just hit all-time lows last week, with the Chargers losing Justin Herbert for the season, and the Raiders putting up 0 points through overtime against the Vikings. Needless to say, what we're going to witness on Thursday night could end up being ugly and yet another low-scoring affair. The Raiders, things should be on the up. It's pretty hard to beat getting 0 points through overtime, and they are playing a Chargers defense that has not been very good against the pass this year, and they have the more experienced quarterback on top of it. But part of me thinks this game could end up being a 50-50 for the simple fact that while the Chargers are dealing with a backup quarterback that we don't really know that much about, they still do have a lot of playmakers around him, and they have more of a chance to maybe shine and carry this team if given the opportunity to. So, I don't know. It's not like the Raiders are the best team, I think this definitely will be a somewhat close affair, but I am going to pick the Raiders in the end, just because I think they're maybe slightly more capable of putting up the points to win this game, and I kind of think the Chargers will be discouraged after losing Justin Herbert. I don't think it's going to be very good for them, so I'll reluctantly take the Raiders. Now let's move into Saturday night, where we're going to have 3 games throughout the day. It should be really awesome. The first one is the Minnesota Vikings versus the Cincinnati Bengals. 2 teams with around the same record. This is a pretty good matchup all around. I think that this one is probably going to go towards the Bengals, just because the Vikings in recent weeks have not looked very promising. The fact that they were able to win getting just 3 points is really sad. The whole Josh Dobbs hype train has crashed and burned. They're moving on. They're going with Nick Mullins instead, which maybe could help for the time being, but feels more like a Band-Aid where they're still probably not going to put up a lot of points, and they're playing a Bengals team that, despite being down Joe Burrow, is starting to figure some stuff out. They seem to have developed a decent system with Jake Browning. They're rolling through. They beat the Colts last week. I like where their heads are at, so I'm going to say the Bengals continue their winning streak, and they beat the Vikings pretty handily. At the 4:30 slot, another interesting game by the NFL. 2 7-6 teams, the Steelers and the Colts. This one could have major playoff implications on the line for that AFC wildcard. Honestly, maybe even an AFC division title, because the Colts aren't that far away from the Jaguars at this point, believe it or not. So, the Steelers, things are hitting an all-time low right now. Losing to the Cardinals and Pats in back-to-back weeks is just absolutely pathetic. Their defense has been a major letdown. I don't know how they let the Patriots put up all those points. Mitch Trubisky, just a mediocre quarterback as you'd expect. Steelers still can't score any points. And the Colts, while they did end up losing to the Bengals, it definitely was a very close game. And in general, over the last handful of weeks, they've looked like the better team than the Steelers. You can just count on them to score more, and honestly, maybe even get more stops on defense based off what we've seen in the last handful of matches. So I'm going to confidently pick the Colts. The Steelers just look absolutely ugly, and this is probably where their season goes completely downhill. And to close out Saturday, the Denver Broncos played the Detroit Lions. Again, another game that is really important for the future of playoff implications. The Broncos are looking to stay in that race to get a potential wildcard spot in the AFC. They need every win they can get, while the Lions are looking to stop the bleeding and maintain their control of the NFC North, which seems to be slipping by the week. This could be a really fun matchup. Goff versus Russ has a lot of intrigue to it. The Broncos defense versus that high-octane Lions offense. There's a lot to look forward to in this one, and there's a lot on the line, and I could see it going either way. For one, the Lions, again, I remain by the fact that they're overdue for an actual good game. It's been way too long. but the Broncos need every single win they can get, and in general, over the last, month and a half to 2 month stretch, they've looked like the much better team compared to Detroit, and for that, I think I'm going to pick the Broncos. I apologize, Denver fans, for not picking you guys last week. I learned my lesson. You guys truly are legit, and you're consistent, and you deserve praise. And honestly, you're just the better football team right now. The Lions have been super lost, and even though they've been winning a couple of games here and there, all of it has been ugly. They haven't played a pretty game in a very, very long time, and at this point, I'm starting to lose faith that they're going to turn it around and that this might be their destiny for the rest of the season. The Lions have to prove to us that they're back with a big game, and against a hungry Broncos team that's been on a roll with that defense, I think their struggles are going to continue. Enough about that though, let's move into the Sunday matchups, and in the 1 p.m. slot, we're going to start with the Bears taking on the Browns. Another pretty interesting game, as both teams maybe had a bit of a surprising performance last week. The Browns were able to put up an offense explosion with Joe Flacco at the helm of all people, while the Bears were able to get a big-time upset over the Lions, where they won in convincing fashion with good defense and Justin Fields and DJ Moore getting it going yet again. I feel like this game could be closer than some people think. I mean, it's clear that the Browns have more talent overall, and I definitely think they're overdue for a defensive masterclass, as the last few weeks have not looked the same for these guys. But the thing is, I don't really know how sustainable that level of offense is that we saw from Joe Flacco against the Jags. You'd have to imagine that's not going to happen on a week-to-week basis with how inconsistent they've been on that side of the ball this season, and while key players are injured and everything. And this Bears team, honestly, they've looked pretty decent in the last handful of weeks. Justin Fields has brought this team back to life a bit on the offensive end, but more importantly, their defense has been putting up some excellent performances, only giving up 10 points to the Vikings, 13 to Detroit. They've turned it around over there when that defense seemed like one of the biggest pushovers in the league for a very long time. And a big reason for this turnaround is all of the turnovers they've been forcing the last 3, 4, 5 weeks. And I think that could end up continuing against a Cleveland offense that isn't just inconsistent, but is also prone to making mistakes regardless of who their starting quarterback is. Honestly, I'm expecting a low-scoring game just knowing how untrustworthy both these franchises are, but in the end, I'm actually going to be picking the Chicago Bears to win this game and extend their winning streak to 3 with a big road game to potentially keep their season alive. The Browns have been giving up a lot of points in a bunch of their games, while the Bears have consistently been forcing turnovers, and I think that'll be the difference. Next up on the schedule, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to Lambeau to play the Green Bay Packers. This one could have some pretty big implications on the playoffs as well. They have the same record. Green Bay is coming off a tough loss to the Giants of all teams, where Jordan Love finally cooled down and looked human again, showing once again that just about anybody can beat the Packers and that they're not invincible. And they're playing a Bucs team that's coming off a huge win against the Atlanta Falcons. They're at 6-7 now. They have a chance to move up to 500 and maybe control their own destiny in the NFC South with a win here. Tampa has generally been fairly competitive this season, and I could maybe see them beating down on a Packers team that's maybe a bit more unsure of themselves. Both teams are 100% prone to losing games that they shouldn't. This one feels like a big-time 50-50. Could go either way. The Packers might even have an advantage, as they're just a better team at Lambeau usually. But I'm going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to get this win and move up to 500. And my reasoning is, well, the NFL never makes any sense. The Packers, they probably should win this game, just knowing how they've played recently. But maybe you could argue they took advantage of some good teams that have been really struggling, like Detroit and Kansas City, and that maybe the Giants exposed them for not being as good as we actually thought. They could definitely still win this game, but I don't know, just the idea of Tampa Bay going in there with their veterans and passing it to Mike Evans with no Jair Alexander covering him and a weak Packers run defense, I think that could be enough to get them a close win. I don't really know what to expect here, but my gut tells me Tampa Bay, so that's who I'm going with. Next up, the Tennessee Titans versus the Houston Texans. A really big game for the Titans in the sake of their season here. After somehow, someway making that miraculous comeback against the Miami Dolphins last week, there's been some life instilled into this team. It seems like D-Hop and Derrick Henry are finally getting it going. They're feeling a bit more comfortable with Will Levis out there as well. I like what I've seen from the Titans. They had a good game against the Colts as well. They're kind of in a groove right now. Maybe they're in a situation where they make a lot of their contest from here on out super competitive, but I think the result of this game is widely going to depend on the health of CJ Stroud. Well, actually, make that CJ Stroud and Nico Collins. So obviously, if Stroud's not playing and the Texans are going with Mills, they really don't stand much of a chance, regardless of how confident their team has been this season. Without their star quarterback there to make the plays, they will fall short and lose to a Titans team that's just more loaded. But in the case that Stroud does play and he suits up and Nico Collins is there and he has the weapons to get it done, I think they'll beat the Titans. They've proven they're the better team this season. But if Stroud plays and he's maybe not 100% and he doesn't have Nico Collins, then things could get interesting if his best receivers are Noah Brown and Robert Woods. This game could come down to the wire, and it'll depend heavily on injury status, but I'm just going to put an asterisk on it for now. If the Titans are able to play against a CJ Stroudless team, they win for sure. If Stroud's there and Collins is there, I'll take the Texans. Next up, the New York Jets versus the Miami Dolphins. Two teams coming off weird trajectories that just don't make any sense. The Jets just blew out the Houston Texans, and Zach Wilson maybe had the best game of his career, and the Dolphins just suffered one of the worst collapses we've seen in recent memory in that horrible loss to the Tennessee Titans. An unfortunate fact arose too for Miami. Clearly, this offense is extremely over-reliant on Tyreek Hill, and if he's not fully healthy, or if they can't connect with him, for whatever reason, they just flop. I don't know why that is, but the Dolphins just can't seem to utilize any of their weapons super well. Now, against the Jets, I don't think this is going to continue. Even with Sauce Gardner there, the Dolphins just make a habit of beating these below 500 teams. The Titans seem like a weird exception. They're not going to blow another game the way they did in that one. It's highly unlikely. And with the Jets, I mean, offensively, it's so unlikely they're going to have a repeat of what we saw in the Houston game. Zach Wilson maybe could have had a coming out game, but at this point in his career, I would highly doubt that. Doesn't seem very likely. This Jets offense is probably going to plummet again, and they're just not going to be able to keep up points-wise. Maybe their defense forces a couple of turnovers to make this one a lot closer than the last one, but Miami should take this home. Moving on, the New England Patriots play the Kansas City Chiefs. The Pats surprisingly got a win against the Steelers on Thursday night last week, and their offense looked somewhat competent, at least in the first half of that game. And with how strong their defense has been, they might be able to take advantage of a Chiefs team that's been on a severe skid and a very frustrated Pat Mahomes. It all kind of boiled to the surface after that matchup with Buffalo, and there's a chance things could continue to spiral out of control. This might end up being a closer game than you'd assume, but in the end, I think the Chiefs probably should win this. The Pats always do this where they get that random win that's like wedged in between 5 other bad ones, so it's probably just going to happen again. The cycle will continue. You can't consistently rely on Bailey Zappi. The Chiefs defense is solid, and I suspect that Pat Mahomes and those guys are going to come out with a fire under their bellies, and they're going to end up winning this one convincingly. There's just no way they're going to play that badly again, even if that Pats defense is not to be trifled with. Mahomes, after such an embarrassing game and such embarrassing actions on the field, you already know that he's going to go out there and probably play the best game we've seen in weeks. We've seen it so many times before with excellent quarterbacks. Next up, the New York Giants traveling to New Orleans to play the Saints. The Giants shockingly got yet another win, this time against a hot Packers team to extend their winning streak to 3. And along the way, Tommy DeVito has shown lots of improvement with clutch drives and big throws that Daniel Jones couldn't even make in his dreams. This Giants team is starting to click. They're kind of ruining their tank in the process, but they now find themselves just one game out of a potential wildcard spot, with the offense looking rejuvenated and the defense playing extremely well. That has been the story on this hot streak. They have forced so many turnovers, and it even continued into the Green Bay game when Jordan Love has been looking so freaking good. That was a great indicator to show if the Giants really can be competitive the rest of the way through against some of the more winnable opponents. The Packers are definitely respectable. The Saints are around their level. So there's a chance the Giants could actually win this one too. Will they? I mean, I feel like the winning streak's eventually going to end. This Saints team is definitely more talented, but it's not exactly like they've looked all that good in recent memory. The last 5, 6, 7 weeks, it's been not very pretty. Even in that blowout win against the Carolina Panthers, their offense wasn't doing much of anything. The reason they won that game is because the Panthers can't score for crap. The Giants should be at least a bit more of a challenge, though, as they have a lot more life in them, and they're looking to turn their season around after their horrible start. They're motivated to win games and get all of those terrible losses out of their minds forever. They've found a young new quarterback to rally around. Everybody's confident in him. He looks confident, too. DeVito magic is in the air, and with how much, or I guess I should say how little the NFL has made sense in recent weeks, I'm gonna say screw it and pick the New York Giants to win this game. I'm a Giants fan at heart, and Tommy DeVito has definitely won me over. I like the momentum they have right now. The Saints team is prone to making mistakes. The Giants defense is hot right now. This seems like a prime position to make another upset happen, to continue to ruin that tank, and maybe at least somewhat be in the playoff conversation. I think this game could go either way, and in all likelihood the Saints should be favored, but upsets are bound to happen this year, and I think the Giants are going to do it yet again. And wrapping up the 1 p.m. slot, the Atlanta Falcons play the Carolina Panthers in an NFC South divisional game. The Falcons got super close to being atop the NFC South, but they just came up short in a good game against the Buccaneers. But luckily for them, they have a chance to bounce right back and maybe still be in first by the time this weekend ends, as they play the Carolina Panthers, the worst team in the NFL. The Panthers continue to not put up any points whatsoever. Their offense is one of the worst in the league, if not the worst right now. Bryce Young can't throw very accurately. They don't have any confidence. And like I've been saying for weeks, until they show us they can actually win and be competitive, there's no reason to pick them. So Atlanta should win this without really having to try. And starting out at the 4 p.m. slots now, the Washington Commanders play the LA Rams. The Commanders are coming off a bye week in which they really needed, as they've been playing some horrible football as of late, and now being well rested against a Rams team that's been beaten up against the Ravens, maybe they have a chance to get back on the right foot. But I don't know, the Commanders just haven't looked right since that second loss to the Giants. Something feels awfully wrong. Their offense continues to make turnover after turnover happen. They're getting stepped all over on the defensive side of the ball. And this Rams team has been playing some great football in the last handful of weeks, including an almost upset victory against the Baltimore Ravens. They forced those guys into overtime, and Baltimore arguably like a top 3, top 2 team in the NFL right now. Most notably, the Rams' offense has been shining. Matt Stafford has been connecting with so many different weapons. Cooper Kupp has been getting more involved recently too, putting up some of his best games of the season. The run game is back to its normal strength. I like where the Rams are at right now, and they probably should be able to beat the Commanders relatively easily. That skid should continue. They just don't look right. They look horrible, so Rams all the way. Up next, a bit of an NFC West divisional game with the Cardinals and the 49ers. Goes without saying that we're all picking San Fran here. There's no reason not to. Even with Kyler Murray, the upset potential is just way too low. It's not going to happen. The Niners have been clicking. They've been playing such amazing football. Arguably the best team in the league right now. Brock Purdy at MVP level, McCaffrey and all the receivers getting into it. They're just going to outpace the Cardinals, and it just won't be much of a contest. We all know it's coming. What's a bit more interesting, though, is the 4:25 game. The Dallas Cowboys versus the Buffalo Bills. The potential game of the week. Should be a fun one, maybe even a potential Super Bowl game later down the line. You never know. Buffalo, they really need to win this one. They've got to continue to keep pace in the AFC playoff race. They need every win they can get. They're desperate. They've been playing better football for the last month or so, and they've got a big-time challenge, maybe even their biggest challenge of the season so far against the Dallas Cowboys. This team has been red hot, and they've looked practically unstoppable in most of the games outside of the Seattle one. Just massive blowout after massive blowout, including a huge win over their rivals, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Cowboys offense has continued to click game after game. They're getting everybody involved. They can seemingly do no wrong. They should be the favorites to win this game. But, again, with how weird the NFL has been, I'm going to pick the Buffalo Bills. I've been trying to go with the predictable outcomes, and it has continuously backfired on me the last handful of weeks. I'm tired of having all of these terrible weeks prediction-wise, so we're going to be bold and pick the underdogs to win. I think the Cowboys are just overdue to get humbled at this point. They're on a massive 5-game winning streak. They've been putting up 33-plus points in every single performance. They're bound to come crashing down to earth a little bit. And why not now against a Buffalo team that really needs to win this game more than they do? The Cowboys are at the height of their confidence right now. They're feeling great after finally beating the Eagles and shutting up their fans. And they're putting up all these points every game, so why not come back down to earth a little bit? When everything seems great is usually when things have gone wrong this season, so I think it's the Cowboys' turn to go through that. It's been a while. My bold prediction is that Dallas are going to be held under 30 points in this game, and that Josh Allen's going to outduel Dak Prescott in a much-needed win to stay in that AFC wildcard playoff race. And wrapping up Sunday, on Sunday night, the Baltimore Ravens travel to Jacksonville to play the Jaguars. This one could be pretty good. If you can recall last year, the Jags actually pulled off a massive upset against the Ravens, and this Ravens team is still prone to blowing leads, so we might see something like that happen again. However, the Jags are most definitely going to be the underdog still after losing to Cleveland last week, and Trevor Lawrence's health still maybe not being at 100% after forcing him to play against the Browns in that matchup. He didn't quite look right. Maybe with some rest he'll do a bit better, but either way he's probably going to get pummeled by a Ravens defense that has looked relatively consistent this season, and the Ravens showed me they have some good resilience after that tough game against the Rams. I'm pretty confident in them. They've got to be feeling good, and I think they've just been one of the best teams in the league this season. So I gotta roll with them over a Jags team that has been kind of unreliable and haven't looked all too great the last handful of weeks. And to end Week 15, the Philadelphia Eagles, the ice-cold Philadelphia Eagles, play the Seattle Seahawks. The Eagles have been on a massive skid, losing to their two biggest NFC rivals in back-to-back weeks. That is not great. You can tell they're frustrated, and that is really good for a Seattle team that is desperate to get back into the win column. There's a chance this ends up being a somewhat high-scoring game. However, I'm not entirely sure what Geno Smith's status is heading into this Monday Night Football game. I believe it's still unclear as of this video on Wednesday, and in the case that he's not playing, I think I can confidently say the Eagles win. I just don't like Drew Lock. But even if he does play, I don't know if it's going to matter. Seattle have this tendency to start strong, but then they can never finish opponents off. We've seen it happen all too often, even against the likes of the Cowboys, and the Eagles generally this season have played good late down the stretch in close matches, and I trust in them to do it again. Even if they are frustrated right now and they're on a skid, they still are Philly. They still do have some of the best talent in the entire world on their squad, and I think now's the time to snap out of it. You got humbled 2 weeks in a row, so it's time to get back on track. Get back to your roots with the run game and not get down behind early, and then maybe their defense actually forces some stops, especially if Drew Lock's playing. I think the Eagles are going to take this one. There's just no way they lose 3 in a row. And that's going to do it for my Week 15 game picks and my previews of all of the matches. This week should be pretty fun. We're back up to a full house, 16 matches, nobody's on a bye week, and there's some huge playoff implications on the line with some of these games. A lot of them seem evenly matched. Some of them may be a bit unpredictable. Upsets could be in the air once again. Other teams are trying to break their cold streak. There's a bunch on the line, and I think it is going to be potentially one of the best weeks of football yet. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you want more NFL content every single week. Peace.